Hi, fellow Django developers. Ezekiel here from alwaysdjango.com, where we discuss interesting Django topics that help you grow, improve as a Django developer. If that sounds interesting, like, subscribe, share this video with anyone you think will find this video important. Let's get into it. So today we are going to discuss Django forms, right? Forms in Django. So if you don't know what forms are just like inputs. They are like the input space where, like, if you go to Facebook, for instance, where you have your username, your password field, and maybe the button to submit, right? That's just a form. It's just a way to send information from the user, from the client to the server, right? In Django, there is a way to work with forms, and that's what we're going to discuss today, right? So in Django, there are two types of forms, like not officially, but there are two types of forms: the non-model form and the model form, right? So we are going to start from the non-model form, then go to the model form, right? So first things first, what we are going to, in Django, just like models, we treat forms as classes, right? So to create a form in Django in the right way, you create classes, right? And those classes, you now render them to your template, and they output your forms, right? So let's see what we're talking about. So in this books app, right, we are going to create a file, call it forms.py, right? In forms.py, we say from Django we import forms, right? So like we said, forms are classes. So let's create the class. Let's name this class test form, right? So from this test form, we import from forms dot form, right? So all your forms, all your non-model forms, let's name this non-model form, right? So all your non-model forms we import from forms.form, right? While your model forms we import from forms.model forms, but we'll get into that, right? So forms, we have our form class right here, right? The next thing will be declaring the input fields that will be in the form, right? Just like models, if you go to our models.py file here, you see that we have model.char field, character field, we have model.text field, we have model.boolean field, etc. So that's the same thing with forms, right? So let's say we have a field for the name, and we say forms.character field, right? So this space will be for the name of the user, right? So in forms, we also have email. Let's say we want emails also dot email field, right? So we have a lot of things here. We have a lot of, you can see we have forms dot, we have date field, have date input, have email fields, we have hidden input, we have image field, etc, right? So we have, like, obviously lots of field for most things that you want to do, or if not all the things you want to do with forms, right? So the next thing will be, we have created these forms now, and next thing will be rendering out this form in your template, right? So let's create a new template file. Let me create a new template file and call it create book.html, and this file will be where we'll be creating our book instances. The file, if you have been following this tutorial, this is a video in a playlist, a Django absolute beginner playlist. So if you have been following, you know that we are trying to create application where we create a book instance. So this file right here, this create book.html, will be using it to create the book instances in the database, right? When we get to there, right? In the next tutorial, we'll be looking at working with post request and what have you. So let's create a view. So let's say create book will be the name of this view. We accept request, then we return the template request here, then we have create book.html, right? So go to our urls.py, we import this create book here, then we'll create a path for it to say path is equal to this name, let's call it this also, right? So I have my server running here. I have my server is on right now. So if I go to localhost port 80, this is what I see, the index page, right? So if I go to create book, it's empty, right? Because nothing is there, right? So what we want to do is that we want to render out the forms in the create book. So the first thing will be importing the form. So from books or dot form, we import test form, right? So we create an instance of it is equal to test form. We'll create an instance of it, then we'll pass it to our template. If you know about views, if you don't know about views, if you don't understand what I'm doing here, you should go and watch the video on Django, on views and templates in Django, right? It should be in the playlist. I'll leave a link to it in the description to make it easier for you. If you don't understand what I'm doing here, I'm suggesting you should go watch that video and come back and continue, right? So, but what we have done is that we have created the form class, we have created an instance of it, and we have passed it to our templates, right? So in our template, we now have access to form, right? So we have access to form. So we now have access to form. So let's make this bigger. Let me on my server again. So the server is on. So my server is on again. If I go back and reload, you can see these forms here. This is the name field and this is the email field that we have created, right? So if we say you can see that they are in line. Right now they are in line, right? They are in line fields. So to make them display as p tags, that's to make them display as block fields, we can say as p, right? And if we go back, reload, you can see they are block fields, right? So we create this in form so that we can submit it. Create this in form. After this, then we create the submit button. We say button type of submit, then we say submit now, right? So if we go back, reload, we see the button, right? But if you see here, if we submit this, let's make this form. The method of this forms should be post method, right? Post request method. In the next tutorial, we'll be looking at how to handle post request in Django. So I'm suggesting you should subscribe and turn on the notification for when we release new videos on that. So here, let's reload. Here we have the space for the name, space for email. So if we submit right now, you can see we are having CSRF token. We are having CSRF verification failure. If you know about CSRF stands for cross-site request forgery, if I'm right. So cross-site request forgery is a way to prevent, is a security method, right? You can read about it, you can read about CSRF token, right? So CSRF verification and CSRF token. So the next thing here, we have to impute our CSRF token so that when we make requests to the server, Django will be sure to accept the request and be sure, because right now Django is not sure that this request is coming from our application, right? But with CSRF token, we'll be sure to tell Django that we're actually making this request. So we'll come here and we'll say CSRF token, right? So after doing that, if we go back, reload and submit again, you can see that our form is submitting. Obviously, we are doing nothing right now, but you can see that our form is submitting, but it's not erroring out on us. It's not outputting the CSRF verification error no more. So, right, in the next video, we'll be doing something when this form is submitted, right? So that's about non-model fields. Let's look at model fields, right? So, like the name implies, model fields are used to create model forms. Model forms are used to create forms for a model, right? Let's say, for instance, we have this model right here and we want to render out a form to create a form that has these fields, right? A form that has these fields for us. So enough of the blabbing. Let me do it. So first of all, like usual, we create the class, right? We call it book form, right? Because we are going to create a form for this book. Let's first import the book in the book model. So we say from dot models we import book, right? So after importing book, then this class should inherit from forms dot model form, right? Forms.model form. You can see for non-model forms, we are inheriting from forms.form. Then for model form, we are inheriting from forms.model form, right? So after this, right now we are saying this form is a model form, but we have now told Django the class, the model we are trying to manipulate with this form, right? The model we are trying to create, update with this form, right? So to tell Django that, to say class inside this your form class, we create another class, and the name of this class must be meta, right? So the name of the class must be meta. In this meta, you say model is equal to book, right? So the model will be book. Then the next argument should be, the next attribute should be, or the next property should be fields, right? So with fields, you can list out, you can see here there is a list, right? So you can list out the fields that you want to output in this model, right? So if we go back to this model, you can see we have name field, description field, is published field, date created field, right? Now is published field has a default value, date created has a default value, is published is a boolean field, the default is true, right? Date created is a date time field, the default is the time zone dot now, right? If you don't know about model, check the next tutorial. I might also leave the link to it in the description. Check the previous tutorials. We have already discussed this, right? So what we want to output now, let's say we want to output name field and the description field, right? So if we go back to the views.py, forms.py, sorry. So in this list, we say the fields we want is the name field as a string, name field, and the description field, right? So after doing this, the next thing will be outputting it in the template in the browser, right? So let me comment this out and say form is equal to, we named it book form, right? So from here we also import book form, right? Because this is the form that we created, this is the form class that we created. So after this, we are seeing we are creating the instance of it, and the name of the variable is form, and we are passing it to the template, right? So the field right now, so the form that we are expect to be outputted with this book will be this book form, right? Let me start my server again. I don't know why it's always going off. So the form that we expect to be outputted will be this book form. So if we go back again and reload, no, we'll go back again and reload. You can see we have here the name of the book and the description of the book. Let's say, for instance, we want to also output the is published is published field, right? This boolean field right here, right? Obviously it will be a checkbox, so but let's see what comes out. So it's published field. If we go back and reload, so you can see this is published field, right? It's a checkbox, right? It's a checkbox. So any field you want to output, you just input them in this list, right? If you want to output all the fields, right? If you want to output all the fields, and let me say you have a lot of fields there, you can simply say as a string, you can simply say underscore underscore all, right? By saying this, you are trying to tell Django to output all the fields in your model, right? That's what you're trying to say here. Django output all the fields in my model. So if we go back and reload again, my system is very slow. I'm running Android Studio here. I'm running Android Studio and an emulator. It's probably so. I'm sorry. So here is the name field, the description field, the published field, and the date created field, right? So that's what we do when we want to output all the fields, right? So let's return to what we had before, the name and description, right? Now, the next argument, what you might say is that this field is not looking okay, it's not looking beautiful, it's not looking presentable. You can't use this for a production application, right? Now, one way to tackle this will be using Crispy Forms, right? And we'll have a tutorial on Crispy Forms on this channel. I'll also leave a link to it in the description. If you're watching on YouTube, it should be popping out as a card, right? You can click on it and watch the video. You can use Crispy Forms. You can use like different CSS template to style your form. You can use Bootstrap, you can use Tailwind, you can use uniforms, right? So watch that video if you want to see how you can make your forms beautiful. But let's say maybe you're using Bootstrap, right? And you want to add classes to these input fields, right? So if we inspect this right now, you can see that there is no class here, right? There is an ID, but Django does this by itself. There is an ID, but Django does this by itself. Well, let's say we want to add a class attribute, right? We want to add an attribute to this input field and maybe style it, right? Let's say, for instance, if we come to create form, let's create a style here. Let's create a style here and say form control. This is a Bootstrap class, but we just create something here. So form control, let's say padding is 1 em, border is 0.5 pixels, solid black, right? So we have created this class, this CSS class, but if we go back, reload, it does not affect anybody because no input field here has that class. Now, to achieve that, to override this input field's attribute, right? To do so, we say here, we override the init function, right? The donder init, the donder, that's underscore init, right? underscore init, right? So let's say init, let me do it by myself. The autocomplete is, so underscore init, the first argument is self because it's a class. Then the next argument will be args. Then the next one will be keywords argument, right? So here we say super, right? By super, what we are trying to do is that we are trying to call the super, we are trying to run this function for, we are trying to call the super instance of this function, right? The normal function that runs when we create this, right? I don't know if that is clear, but you don't really need to understand that for this tutorial. You can go and read it up and check it out what super does. If you are at this point in Django, I think you should know what super does, right? So after this, we have run the super init function. After this, we say self.fields. Now, which field do you want to manipulate? Let's say we want to manipulate this name field, right? We say name, right? Then we say widget.attributes.update, which is a method. Now, in this update method, we enter a dictionary, right? The dictionary of attributes. Obviously, HTML attributes come in value and keys and values, right? For instance, we have this name key, this is the value, the columns key, this is the value, the rows view, this is the value, etc, right? So also classes comes with class, that's the key, right? And the value, maybe the form control as the value, right? So let's say the attribute we want to override is class, that's the key, then the value is form control, right? So what we are saying here is that for init, that's init, right? When this function runs, run the super instance of this init, then self.function name, get this input field. In this input field, there is a widget argument. In that widget, there is an attribute, then update. In that update, you can pass in arguments. You can pass in arguments, CSS attributes that you want to update, right? So if we go back, you can see how our form is looking. This input field, that's the only one that we overwrote. So you can see how it's looking right now. If we reload, and come back here to the input, you can see. So inspecting right here, you can see there is no class attribute here. It's probably because we made a mistake. Let's go back. Probably because I made a mistake. And you can see here, this is not underscore underscore init underscore. This is underscore underscore init, then underscore underscore. That's double underscores between, double underscores after the init, right? So if we do this, you can see underscore underscore init, right? So if we go back and reload, you can see how it's looking now. If you inspect again, you can see that this is bigger because it now has a pattern. You can see we have this class here. This class is equal to form control etc. So you can also, I guess I've not tried overwriting the type. Let's say type is equal to, let me say, password type, right? So let me check my server. My server is reloading. It's on now. So if I go back, reload. So if I inspect this, you can see that we are having the class as this, but the form tag, the type is not overwriting, obviously, because we are using a character field here. We are using a character field here. That's the model is a character type. The model here is a character type, right? So not a password. So for most our tutorial codes, right, we'll be pushing it, I'll be pushing it to this GitHub repository, right? This GitHub repository, YouTube complete, my GitHub repository, YouTube complete Django beginner playlist, right? I'll leave a link to it in the description. So if you come to this repository, right, if you come here to the branches, you get a list of branches. Now in these branches, for if you want to maybe look at the code for the URLs and views tutorial, you come here and click on the branch. If you want to look at the code for models and database and what have you, you come here and click on the branch. You can then maybe download the zip code or git clone it, right? So that's it for this. So that's it for me today, guys. In the next tutorial, we'll be looking at how to handle post request in Django, right? How you can submit this form, right? This create book form, how you can submit this form and save it to the database, right? Obviously, now it's not doing nothing. It's just reloading and what have you. So that's it for me today. Next tutorial will be handling post request. I guess you should, if I was you, I would subscribe and turn on the notification. Leave a like on the video because it helps with the algorithm and things like that. So thank you. Take care of yourself. Peace.